Now you may have noticed that when you run on a treadmill, the numbers on your watch, like your pace and your distance, just don't match what the treadmill is saying, or like at all. And this is because when you're running outside, your watch can use a GPS signal to get a precise measure of how fast you're running. But when you're inside on a treadmill and you're not actually going anywhere, your watch has to calculate things in a slightly different way. And some of the things that you're doing whilst running can massively throw off those calculations. So by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what you need to do to make your watch as accurate as possible when you're running indoors. My name's Dan, I'm a run coach and a tech geek, and I break down the issues that us regular runners face so that you can get the most from your gear and improve your own running. Now, in order to calculate what we need to do, we need to have a basic understanding of how our watch calculates our pace, whether you're running outdoors or running indoors, which means we need the whiteboard and my crude drawing skills. So we know from basic maths that speed equals distance over time, right? Which means that in order to calculate your speed or your pace, your watch needs to know the distance that you're covering and the time that you're doing it in. Now the time part, that's easy, your watch can measure that, but it's going to measure distance differently depending on whether you're running indoors or outdoors. So this is you on an outdoor run. You've had 5 hours of sleep, you're over caffeinated, but it's okay because you've got your fancy Garmin watch and your running shoes, so you're ready to go. And your watch has GPS, so it sends up a signal to the closest GPS satellite, which bounces back and it can determine your exact location. GPS, Global Positioning System. And then you set off running, a few seconds later you're now here, there we go, and your watch sends up the signal again, bounces it back. So now your watch can tell that in that amount of time you've covered that distance and it can measure your pace accurately from that. And keep this in mind because we're going to come back to it later on. When you run at different speeds, you're moving your arms in a different way and your watch can actually learn your movement patterns, and that's going to impact your indoor pace. So outdoor runs are pretty easy. In order to get your speed, it's just calculating your distance between your GPS signals and the time that you've taken to cover that distance. Now indoor runs is where it gets a little bit trickier because we're still using the same calculation. We want our speed, so we need distance over time. But because we don't have access to this GPS satellite, because you're indoors and you're not moving, this suddenly becomes a lot harder to figure out. So it says, okay, well, if I don't have a GPS signal to go off of, then I'm going to take the stride length and I'm going to multiply that by the cadence to get a rough idea of the distance that we're covering. So for example, if you had a stride length of 1 meter and your cadence was about 170 steps per minute, you would be covering 1 times 170, so 170 meters every minute, which works out as just under a kilometer every 6 minutes. Which makes sense, but the biggest issue with this is that anything that affects our natural arm swing or makes it different from how we would normally swing our arms when we're running outdoors is going to throw off that calculation and give you an inaccurate pace. So what can you do to minimize the chances of this happening? Now the first thing that we can do is to fix our form so that it's as similar on a treadmill as it is to our natural outdoor running form. Because there's a lot of things about running on a treadmill that changes the way that you run. For example, a lot of people are understandably worried about falling off of the back of a treadmill. So a lot of people will run right at the front of a treadmill, and what this does is this shortens your stride quite a bit because you've usually got that big plastic shield in the front of a treadmill, right? So you shorten your stride, your foot doesn't land as far in front of you as it normally would, and you end up taking more steps to compensate. And if you're still pumping your arms in the same way, but you're taking more steps, then your cadence has gone up and your watch interprets that as a faster pace. So your watch will often read a faster pace than what the treadmill is reporting because you've artificially increased your speed. But going the other way, if you look at how a treadmill's normally set up, you've got your handles and there's usually some kind of screen in front of you but just below, which a lot of people end up staring at, which usually causes you to then crane your neck over, which hunches your shoulders over, and you end up running a bit more like this. You've got this tense shoulders, you're not really relaxed, and your arms stop moving the way that they normally would, because instead of them swinging naturally whilst you're running outside, you're kind of running a little bit like this and they're not really moving. What's your watch going to do? Your watch is going to look and think, okay, well, because they're not swinging their arms as much, they're not generating as much force, which means they're not running as fast, and their stride length has gone down. So we're going to report a slower speed than what the treadmill is reporting. Or you're constantly checking your pace, which means you're looking at your watch, trying to hold it still so that you can read it. Your watch stops moving and again it slows down. So you can see that there's all of these different things that are really going to impact the accuracy of what your watch is reporting, because every 30 seconds or so, something's happening that is stopping it from just swinging normally and giving a consistent reading. So in order to fix your form and to make your running as similar running inside as it is to running outside, there's a couple of things that I want you to do. The first thing is going to be take half a step back so that you're running on the middle of the treadmill belt. This is going to let you just stretch your legs out a little bit more, and your stride is just going to mimic how you would run outdoors a lot more closely. That's going to make a massive difference to your pace readings. The next thing I want you to do is to think about where you would normally look when you're running outdoors. Because when you're running, you want to have a fairly upright posture. You want to have your head up, your chest open so that you're looking ahead. That's going to keep you nice and springy and reduce your ground contact time and just generally make you a more efficient runner. I want you to do the same thing when you're on the treadmill. Head up, chest up, looking ahead at you. And I'm going to cut in a clip here of the view that I've got when I run on my local gym's treadmill because it sucks. But that's going to be the best way to keep your running as similar to your outdoor running as possible, to improve your readings and to just generally make your running a little bit more enjoyable. And then the final thing for your form is to try and relax your shoulders down away from your ears as much as possible. Because as soon as you're running with tension in your shoulders, your arms stop moving and your arms are a massive propeller forwards for your running. So the second you relax your shoulders down, rather than running tightly like this and have your arms kind of as soon as your shoulders relax, down away from your ears, all of this relaxes, your arms can swing much more naturally. And that again is going to be much closer to that natural arm swing from running outside. These three things together are going to have a massive impact on the consistency of your pace reading when you're running inside on a treadmill. And bonus tip, don't check your watch as much because the more you're lifting your watch up, staring down at it, the more you're messing with your shoulders and stopping your watch from moving. So trust the pace, trust the speed you're running at, try to look at your watch as little as possible and just let your arms keep swinging. Okay, next up, we need to make sure that your watch is calibrated properly. And this is the point that we touched on earlier, is how you run on your outdoor runs is going to influence what pace reading you get from your watch when you're running indoors. Because as you run at different speeds, your body is going to move differently, right? So your super easy pace, nice and relaxed, your arms are going to move in a different way to if you're really going for it, threshold pace, arms are really driving, much more force coming from your arms and your legs. So every time you run outdoors, your watch is using those built-in sensors to figure out how everything's moving on the different speeds that you're running at, and it's calibrating that against your GPS movements so that it knows it's accurate. But the thing that most people forget is that as you get more experience and your fitness increases and your form gets better, the way that you run is going to change at different speeds. So the way that you run at a 6-minute kilometer now might be very different to how you ran at a 6-minute kilometer 4 weeks ago. So regularly running outside is going to be necessary to calibrate exactly what speeds you run at and how the watch takes those measurements at that different speeds. And not only do you need to be regularly running outside, you need to be regularly running at a bunch of different speeds outside to give your watch as much data as possible so that when you're next running inside, it can be as precise and as accurate as possible. And if you're not running outside as much and you're stuck inside on a treadmill a lot, you can still calibrate your watch to what the treadmill is saying after every workout. As soon as you end your workout on an indoor run, if you scroll down before hitting save, you're going to get the option to calibrate it to the treadmill, input what the treadmill's distance was, and then that's at least going to improve the calibration of your watch compared to the treadmill that you're using. And if you're not sure and the watch readings still look weird and are spiking all over the place, just use the treadmill number because it's going to be more accurate than what your watch is saying. Now we can improve our form and we can make sure our watch is calibrated, but there's always going to be some margin of error in using something that's on our wrist to measure how fast we're moving. So if you want the most accurate data possible, then the best thing that you can do is to get yourself one of these, which is a footpod. Now you can think of footpods as all of the accelerometers and the sensors and the gyroscopes that are normally in your watch, but on steroids. They're a lot more accurate, they're a lot more specific, and because they're strapped directly to your foot, they're going to give you a much better indication of how you're actually running than your watch is going to. So your stride length is going to be more accurate, your cadence is going to be more accurate, and it can send that data directly to your watch so that you've got a quicker and a better representation of your pace than what your watch can work out alone. Now, this isn't sponsored, no one's paying me to try and make you buy stuff you don't need, but if you do run regularly on a treadmill, then a footpod could be a good investment, especially if you like to use the incline as well, because your watch has got no idea about incline. But if you're doing running power-based workouts or you're doing anything with hills, a footpod is going to give you a much better idea of the power you're generating than your watch is going to be able to. Also, side note, some Garmin heart rate monitors now do also measure your indoor running pace. So they're not as good as a footpod, but they're better than a watch. So I think it's the HRM Pro Plus or the HRM 600. I don't know, I don't have either of them, but they can help you get a better indoor pace reading as well. But if you're just occasionally doing a treadmill run because it's raining outside again, then you probably don't need one. Focus on fixing your form first. That was a lot of Fs. Fix your form first, make sure that you're running outside regularly and at different speeds to make sure that it's calibrated, and then if you really want to, look at a footpod for the most accurate data. But by some combination of all of these, your watch should match a lot more closely with the treadmill now. And now that you can run on the treadmill properly, you'll want to know what your training zones are, so you should watch this video next to help figure them out.